Should Steve Cohen make Jacob deGrom the highest paid pitcher in MLB history this offseason? Gonna answer that on this edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, today's rough. We're watching the Phillies and the Braves play in the NLDS. The Mets are sitting at home. So, I understand the frustration among the fan base right now, and we've already shifted into off-season mode and off-season discourse. And one of the things that I spent the last 24 hours debating with people on Twitter is the merits of Jacob deGrom. And I feel like as a fan base, there is a tendency to be, I don't want to say overly emotional, but I just said it. So I guess that's where I'm at here, where the frustrations can spill over in a way and you want to point the finger. And Jacob deGrom misses 2/3 of the season this year. He missed time last year. Everyone's ready, or not everyone, but there's a portion of the fan base that's ready to push him out the door and say, you don't deserve all the money you're making. John Heyman wrote the type of column or article, whatever you want to call it, where it was almost like he was a scorned lover, the way he was trashing Jacob deGrom, calling him a cameo pitcher, basically putting his hands in his pocket. Now, the thing about what Jacob deGrom is going to get paid this offseason is you get paid based on your market. So Jacob deGrom, if he cashes in a check to be the highest paid pitcher in MLB history, it's because there's so many teams chomping at the bits to get a guy that can go out and dominate lineups like no one else, that he will get paid commensurate of what his talent is, regardless of the injury history. But the injury history element of this is something that I've felt really compelled to refute, because it's like we can't look beyond the last literally 16 months and remember who the guy was before that. We're not talking about Chris Sale here. We're not talking about Carlos Rodon, who fans are fired up to sign after his first completely healthy season since his rookie year. He, in 8 seasons, had injuries every single year, oftentimes really keeping him off the field up until really the 2021 season, where he made it through mostly healthy, but still wore down the stretch. And this year, he finally proved his health. Now, I'm not saying I don't like Carlos Rodon. And that was really the tweet that I had. And basically it was, I said, if you were telling me you'd rather have Rodon over deGrom based on deGrom's injury history, you don't know what you're talking about. That wasn't in relation to deGrom's health. It's the fact that you can't say you're scared of deGrom's injury history on a long-term deal and be completely comfortable signing Carlos Rodon, because he has a longer track record of injuries. So I like both of these pitchers as free agents. It's the best 2 starters on the market. And we're going to discuss that a bit in the final segments today. What other options does deGrom have? What other options do the Mets have? But to paint deGrom as a pitcher that has always been hurt and will never get healthy again, it's not looking at the full scope of his career, because rookie season wasn't hurt. 2015 made 30 starts, over 190 innings pitched into the postseason, was healthy all the way through. 2016, he made 24 starts, pitched 148 innings, did have the one injury of his career prior to what we saw in 2021. Then you have healthy seasons in 17, 18, and 19 where he eclipses 200 innings pitched. You have a 2020 season where, yes, there was a couple nagging injuries that popped up near the end of the year, but he made 12 starts in a 60-game season. So, in my math's correct, 60 divided by 5 is 12. That's a healthy year. 2021, the guy pitched to a 1.08 ERA in 15 starts and was absolutely unbelievable. And yes, he got hurt. And then he gets hurt in spring training. But he didn't have thoracic outlet syndrome. He didn't have one of these injuries that definitely foreshadows further health problems. You obviously have to be concerned with what he's done the last 2 years when it comes to the injuries, but I don't think you write the guy off entirely. And I really believe it's partly an emotional reaction based on the past that this franchise has with injuries, because David Wright and Yoenis Cespedes in particular are a couple of the last guys that got paid very well that weren't able to live up to the contracts due to injury. And I understand that trepidation. And in the next segment, as I detail the contract I'd offer Jacob deGrom, you'll see that I bake in some parameters there that could help the Mets kind of offset that injury concern. At the same time, isn't this the franchise that calls the trade of Tom Seaver the Midnight Massacre or something along those lines? Well, what is the Tom Seaver? As a Mets fan, I'm better than this. It is the Midnight Massacre, correct? Okay, I'm not off base. I had that right. But yes, if you were that emotional about Tom Seaver getting moved, how could you not feel the same way about Jacob deGrom? Because to me, the thought of deGrom pitching for another team and only getting some draft compensation based on a qualifying offer for him, that's a really tough pill to swallow. And I think the case to deGrom to want to stay is, look, you're building a legacy with this franchise. You can play your entire career with one team. You can potentially win a World Series because now this is a franchise that you would expect to be in the playoffs every year. And if you were to lead this team to a World Series, I mean, jersey retirement, that's almost a given. I think he's already a Mets Hall of Famer anyway. Um, and honestly, he could own a lot of the records in franchise history. He could chase down Tom Seaver and he could have a statue next to him outside the ballpark one day. To me, I think that it's worth it for deGrom to maybe deal with some of the headache of pitching in New York to get that type of a legacy play. But I also can understand if he wants to just move on and spend more time with the family and get out of the big stress that is pitching in the New York market and just enjoy the remainder of his career with a chance to win a World Series with another team that maybe offers him a better opportunity to do that. But I don't understand any fan that has watched this guy's career and welcomes him pitching for another team. To me, it makes no sense. But we'll discuss that a little bit more in the next segment because I have a contract that I would offer Jacob deGrom right now that I think he could accept. Before we get to that, though, I don't know about you, but I hate wearing dress shirts. I mean, they always just feel uncomfortable to my skin. They're tight. It's tough to find the right fit. It's just not my preferred choice of wear until I heard of Roan, because the dress shirt was due for a radical reinvention, and Roan stepped up to the challenge with their commuter shirt, which is the most comfortable, breathable, and flexible shirt known to man. Roan's comfortable four-way stretch fabric provides breathability and flexibility that leaves you free to enjoy what life throws your way, from your commute to work to 18 holes on the golf course. It's time to feel confident with a wrinkle-free shirt without the hassle. With Roan's wrinkle release technology, wrinkles disappear as you stretch and wear the shirt. It's that easy. It also includes the Gold Fusion, anti-odor technology, which will keep you smelling fresh all day long. On top of that, Roan is 100% machine washable, so you can ditch the dry cleaner altogether. The commuter shirt can get you through any workday and straight into whatever comes next. Head to roan.com/lockedon and use the promo code lockedon to save 20% off your entire order. That's 20% off your entire order when you head to roan.com. That's spelled RHONE.com/lockedon and use that code lockedon. It's time to find your corner office comfort. All right, let's find a contract structure that works for Jacob deGrom and the New York Mets. Max Scherzer last year, he set that baseline, right? He's making $43.3 million a year. DeGrom's going to want to get paid that much, but at the same time, there's the injury risk. Now, I don't think there's any question that deGrom can get $40 million per for multiple teams this offseason. That is how good he is. The question is how many years? Is it 4 for 120? Is it, or sorry, 3 years for 120 at 40 million per? Is it $45 million a year for 2 years? Is he getting a 2-year, $100 million contract with someone? I have no idea what teams will come up with to try to get this guy signed away from the Mets. But here's what I would do: a 5-year deal with a $35 million base salary every single season. So that's 5 years, $165 million. I'd even throw a $5 million sign-up bonus in there to give him $170 million guaranteed. But here's where it gets interesting. When Jacob deGrom pitches, he's the most valuable pitcher in the sport. So I want to reward him for that, reward him for staying on the mound. So if it's up to me, I'm saying, here you go. $35 million is your base salary. But if you reach 100 innings, get an extra $5 million. So he's basically assuming health, or at least relative health, looking at being a $40 million pitcher. I throw another $5 million at him if he gets to 150 innings. So now, if you get a healthy deGrom season where he eclipses 150 innings, you can even make it 160 potentially, then he's getting paid more than Scherzer. And if you want to take it a step further, you could even do this. You could say, all right, incentives at 100, 160, and 210. So Jacob deGrom eclipsed 210 innings pitched. He could be a $50 million pitcher, because the value you would get if you got 210 innings of Jacob deGrom, it's invaluable to actually calculate it. Now, last year in December, Fangraphs was calculating what players were getting paid in free agency based on wins above replacement. So for each win, the average, free agent dollar spent, you were looking at $8.5 million per win. So this past year, only making 11 starts, Jacob deGrom with the 2.2 F4 was worth $18.7 million. That's an 11 starts. You multiply that by 2, if he makes 22 starts, he's already worth $37.3 million. So right there, you're talking about that $35 million base. Now, the more he pitches, the more incentives he gets, but the more value you're getting for him. If Jacob deGrom is healthy and he puts up a 7 F4 season, you're talking about him being worth $60 million to the team. And even then, the highest benchmark he could hit based on the contract I just outlined would be 50 million. Now, I think depending on the market, things could come back to the Mets. But the problem with playing the market is you risk insulting this guy again. He is not happy with the contract he had, and rightfully so. If you look at what he's done for his career, the guy is criminally underpaid. Now, you'll say, well, look what he made the last 2 years. And, I know John Heyman put out there how much money he made per inning and all that stuff. I get it. I understand that type of thought process, but in his 9-season career, you know how much money Jacob deGrom has actually cashed out on? Just over 72 million for a career where he's won 2 Cy Youngs, a 4-time All-Star, has an ERA title, and a Rookie of the Year to his resume. That's not a lot of money. Okay. So, I mean, look at this one. I'm just quick math on this one, or just a quick search. How much money do you think Rick Porcello made in his 14-year career? $124 million and change. So I don't blame deGrom for wanting to get paid, but the structure I outlined is a way that he could get his base salary at $35 million, and if he's healthy, he could be a $45 million pitcher like he deserves to be. And to me, if you're the Mets, you do it because we just watched it play out in the postseason. And if you fancy yourself a team that's going to be in October every year, what you want is guys that can go out and win you a playoff game. And the only guy in the Mets this year that went out and won them a playoff game was Jacob deGrom. So as much as I understand it's a gamble, you're gambling on your own guy. You're gambling on someone who should be going into Cooperstown with a Mets cap. That's what you're investing in here. And we've seen other guys have injuries and find their way out of it. Considering his track record prior to the last 16 months, I still think there's enough reason for optimism where you can structure a contract and get this thing done, because he is so valuable to the franchise. And the other things you could see in any potential contract, aside from the parts of the deal we wouldn't know, like suites on the road and all that type of stuff, I could see incentives for Cy Youngs, incentives for NLCS MVP, World Series MVP, and even an opt-out after the 3rd season. Whatever you have to do to structure that contract so that you get deGrom to sign on the dotted line, I'm on board with. I don't want to see him pitching with the Braves next year or another team, but what I do want to explore now is which other team could he go to, and where could the Mets pivot if they don't land deGrom? I'll discuss that in just a minute, but if you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, do you know you're depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys? And guess what? They got a brand new flavor. It's delicious. It's indulgent cookie dough that's covered in chocolate. That's right. Built has done it again with their brand new cookie dough chunk puffs. They're light and chewy in texture with real cookie dough chunks. And of course, they come covered in 100% real chocolate. All the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of making it. Plus, it's actually healthy for you, only coming with 160 calories and a whopping 15 grams of protein in them. Like all Built Bars, the new cookie dough chunk puffs are covered in 100% real chocolate, which means they're healthy and tasty. The chocolate covered cookie dough has a light, fluffy texture, which is so good, and it's made with a collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently, providing you with tons of health benefits. Eat something that tastes good and is good for you by going to built.com and trying the new cookie dough chunk puffs. All you have to do is go to built.com, use the promo code locked on 15, and you're going to get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code locked on 15 for 15% off at built.com. Who else would be interested in signing Jacob deGrom, and where can the Mets go if he's signed elsewhere? I'll start with the first part of that question, which is who else could want deGrom? There's a team in Los Angeles that's always interested in all the big names, that is an absolute juggernaut, that lost their ace for next season as Walker Buehler underwent Tommy John surgery, that could see Clayton Kershaw retire or walk to Texas or return. We still don't know what's going on with him. And outside of that, while they have a lot of great pitching in the pipeline, they would love a bona fide ace. They spent all that money on Trevor Bauer, and the Mets wanted him also. Now it seems like Bauer won't return to their rotation. So you got a void there atop of it. deGrom would fill it, and they're the type of team that would just give him that blank check that he wants, and in my opinion, based on his career numbers, still does deserve. Now, if it's not the Dodgers, what other teams are we looking at? Let's just say the New York Yankees lose Aaron Judge this offseason. Would they be compelled to throw a big bag of cash at deGrom? Could the Texas Rangers, who are looking to build an identity in that new ballpark and be contenders, decide, you know what, we've already spent money on Seager and Simeon, let's just give deGrom a 3-year, $140 million insane contract and bring him into the fold and see what happens? Potentially. There's the Angels, there's the Red Sox, there's the Phillies, all teams that will spend big money at times. The team that scares me the most is the Atlanta Braves, though. Now, the Braves continue to lock up their young talent. They have a lot of money on the books, but it's all affordable contracts, and they really have kept themselves in a nice range here where they could probably bring in deGrom without being a luxury tax team or being right up against it. So they're an option. They just gave Charlie Morton $20 million next year. That is, in my opinion, a good thing because potentially there's so much money tied up in Morton, and knowing that you have maybe Mike Soroka comes back next year, you have Max Fried, you have Spencer Strider, you have guys like Bryce Elder, you still have Kyle Wright, Ian Anderson. I mean, they have a lot of pitching there. So I don't necessarily think that they have to go out and get Jacob deGrom, but if they can, if deGrom is interested, it's scary because we know deGrom lives in North Florida, so the Braves are a close team to him there. We know he wants to compete for a World Series. They have a better roster right now going into next season than the Mets do. He would really piss off the fan base if he signed there, but I can see it happening. And because of that, that's all the more reason to make sure you lock this guy down. Now, if deGrom does sign with the Braves, the Dodgers, the Rangers, the Yankees, whoever else it is, where could the Mets go in free agency? Well, I already mentioned him on the show, Carlos Rodon. He's a good option. I'm not knocking Carlos Rodon. All I'm saying is that he has an injury history too. So I just find it laughable to say, hey, let's get Rodon because deGrom's too hurt. We can't trust that he's going to be healthy. My only thought is, can you trust that Rodon's going to be healthy? I don't know. I think he's worth the gamble, just like I think deGrom's worth the gamble. But you just have to weigh the risk reward. And to me, I think even if it costs an extra $10 million, $15 million for deGrom over Rodon, because of his history with the franchise, because of his significance in franchise history, because of what he can do on the biggest of stages, and a healthy Jacob deGrom is better than any pitcher in baseball still. Look at the advanced metrics this year. Best strikeout rate, best right in the top 5% in walk percentage, whiff percentage, expected ERA, expected WOBA, expected batting average, fastball velocity, fastball spin, chase rate. I mean, the guy's incredible. And even in a down year, he put up these numbers that had him ranked as one of the top pitchers in the game. I just personally think that all the alternatives are inferior. Justin Verlander could hit the market. Are you going to pay Verlander instead of deGrom? And is Verlander really going to even, opt out of his contract? Or is he going to remain in Houston or get another deal with Houston? Seems like they really like each other out there. So I can see Verlander returning, whether it's on his current contract or on a new deal. Kershaw, could he be available? Potentially. But is he going to leave LA for the Mets? I think the only other place he would go is the Rangers. You can bring back Chris Bassett, but he's no deGrom. Luis Severino's out there. Michael Wacha, bounce back, career resurgent year in Tampa. How much do we believe in that? And do you believe in it enough to say, hey, yeah, Michael Wacha, you replace Jacob deGrom. Nathan Eovaldi, Noah Syndergaard. I mean, there's not a lot out there. If deGrom leaves, I think you got to make a trade. And so when you look at that aspect of it, paying the extra money to retain Jacob deGrom, or let's say trade Brett Beatty to bring in a new guy you had to pay. I just think that it makes too much sense to bet on deGrom. I think the bet of deGrom and Scherzer in the playoffs is a worthwhile gamble. I know it didn't work out this year, but I really do think that there's a chance that it can work out big time for them in the future. And I think if Steve Cohen told us anything about the way he thinks last offseason, the way he looked at the top of the market and said, I know we need starting pitching. Max Scherzer's available. I'm getting him. I don't see why he wouldn't do the exact same thing this year for someone that has been, the guy for this franchise since, really his rookie year, 2014, but particularly since the 2015 season where he cemented himself as the Mets ace and hasn't looked back ever since. I want to see deGrom return to Mets uniform next year. And at this point in the offseason, if we're looking at all the free agents that could go here, I talked about that on yesterday's show. I think losing deGrom would be the most devastating of any of the players that could, go to a different team off of this squad this year. So we'll see what the Mets do, but that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. On tomorrow's show, we'll do something similar with Brandon Nimmo, and then we'll close out the week with Edwin Diaz. Top 3 free agents on the Mets. What do they do with these guys? And then we'll also be doing offseason outlook at some point in the future. What do the Mets need to do to address their roster this season? But that's going to be all. Thank you, as always, for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, @FinkelsteinRyan. Follow the show, @Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, I got Locked On MLB, hosted by Paul Francis Sullivan. Locked On MLB is where you want to go to stay up to date with everything going on in Major League Baseball. You'll follow Locked On MLB wherever you get podcasts.